For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, alongside Connor Morrissette for Instant Analysis from USC's Wednesday evening practice of Arizona State Week. There's a little bit to talk about. Really, yesterday was a jam-packed day, and today we have a little bit less. We got to talk with outside wide receivers coach Dennis Simmons. I know you've got some practice observations. Where do you want to start?
Sure, practice observations, let's start there. We don't get to see a ton of it, but we did see some cool stuff today. So, Raesjon Davis and the linebackers, they were in a drill where an offensive lineman blocks them and then they have to tackle the ball carrier. And Chris and I saw Raesjon Davis take some really great reps in that drill. He's a guy who played a lot of edge in high school, and that's been a big subject the past few weeks. And it looked like him playing on the edge in high school helped him in this drill. A few of the other guys, it took him a little while to get used to that. Eventually, the blocker went away, and the linebackers just had to tackle the running back. And Tackett Curtis made a great play on a running back, and Eric Gentry did really well. So guys started to progress and look really good, and everyone is out there. Mason Cobb is out there too, so I expect most of those guys to be available against Arizona State. I heard what Chris said yesterday. Just because you're available doesn't mean you'll play. He knows more than I do. I do expect all those guys to be available, so that was cool to see. During the punt return and kickoff return stuff, the assistant coaches had the exercise balls. They were thrown at the players so they'd catch the punt or the kick, and then they'd get a ball thrown at them and they'd have to dodge the ball. That's always just fun to watch. It's not live football, obviously, but that's the next best thing. Can you avoid the ball? I thought that was cool. Bear Alexander hitting the sled. It makes the loudest noise out of anyone hitting the sled in practice, so he continues to really impress me. Shane Lee had a nice spin move. It's a lot of minor things, but overall we got to see the most from the linebackers, and it was cool to see him work today.
And only got to talk with one coach after practice, Dennis Simmons, the outside wide receivers coach. You asked him a couple questions. There was a lot of people huddled around his scrum, enough to where I couldn't even really fully hear him. So what were your biggest takeaways?
Well, he said that in conference play, expect him to rotate 7 or 8 receivers, which I think a lot of people knew that, but it was good to hear him say it. So there's still going to be a lot of guys at receiver seeing the field, and I think that's interesting. And I don't want to get to 7 and 8 right now, but I imagine that would include Deuce Robinson, I think. So I think we will still continue to see some of these really good freshmen, and especially if the game, as expected, is a blowout, then we'll see a lot of freshmen at the end. But it looks like some guys are cracking into that top rotation, which is really cool to see. I also asked him about Taj Washington, because Lincoln Riley said a couple weeks ago that Washington, when they first got here, they gave him a bunch of stuff to improve on, and I was wondering specifically what that was, and Coach Simmons said the deep balls. They wanted him to get better on those deep passes. He didn't control his body when he was running some of those deeper routes, and like Riley said, Simmons said today, Taj Washington, like he does with everything, did a really good job responding to that, works really hard, so detailed. He is a professional in everything he does, and that was echoed today. I thought Coach Simmons, he's a soft-spoken guy, but he gave some good answers today.
Yeah, and I know USC fans, they like to blame that trade of Tahj Washington's probably on Graham Harrell, the offensive coordinator who used to throw those 50-50 deep balls to Tahj Washington, who you had, Drake London on the field, Michael Pittman on the field. People wondered why those were going to Washington, but it is something that I think he has gotten much better at in his USC career. And kind of speaking about Tahj, Marshawn Lloyd, running back, was asked about who's really stepped up since the start of the season as a leader on offense, and he mentioned Washington as a guy who leads by example. He's just a professional, as you mentioned, doesn't ask any questions. So if the coaches asked him to do anything, he's there. Lloyd said if the coaches asked him to play running back, he would do it, no questions asked. So clearly a guy who has stepped up to lead. I know you guys had that one-on-one podcast with him. That was my biggest takeaway, is how, taking notes based on whatever the coaches say doesn't even have to be to him. If they're teaching another player, like, he wants to write that down and learn as much as he can from the offense. And Tahj continues to impress, and we get to learn more about him every week, and kind of everything that comes out, you start to like this guy a little bit more.
Certainly, and you mentioned it. He takes notes not on just his own position in these meetings, but on the positions of other players, other receivers in the room, so that way he has a better understanding of the whole concept. So I thought that was really cool. And yeah, Tahj Washington, there's a reason he's the leading receiver on a team that is stacked at the wide receiver position right now. It's because it's not just that he's a great athlete, it's because he put so much work into preparation and into game day, and I expect him to have a major role against Arizona State. How long do you think he will see the field, though? Will this be a game, Jack, where they're out in the third quarter? Will we see him in the fourth quarter? Will it be a little closer? We don't get too much into Arizona State. We have tunnel vision tomorrow, but do you think we'll see Tahj Washington much in the second half on Saturday?
I think, we saw the starting offense out there for just the first half, basically. But I think this is going to be a different week. I don't think they're going to need them against Arizona State, but it also is, you're starting to ramp up in that part of the schedule. You've got Colorado next week, where you feel like, especially at altitude, like, you're going to need your guys to be ready to put their full effort out there. They're really going to have to fully exert themselves on the football field, as well as this is USC's first road game. You want everyone to be fully prepared to go on the road. I don't think Arizona State's going to be a hostile environment, but it's definitely an environment you want the guys ready on the road for. So it'll be very interesting. I'm not sure I'm going to say we're going to see him for all 60 minutes of the game, but I don't think they're going to get pulled at halftime, even if USC's up. I don't think they score 49 points again, but if they're up big at halftime, I think you see these guys get a little bit longer of a leash because you want them to be ready for the harder part of the schedule, as well as kind of be ready to go on the road.
And this plays into something that Lloyd said as well. He talked about how he's been impressed with the Arizona State defense on tape, and I watched that first half against Fresno State. For as bad as the offense was, million quarterbacks coming in, they were down to their fourth stringer at one point. They had 8 turnovers on offense. It was putrid. On defense, only giving up 29 points when you turn the ball over that many times. The defense was really good, and ASU had some great corner blitzes that they took advantage of, and it sounded like Marshawn Lloyd, he was aware of the talent on that defense, and I think we can say that this is going to be the best defense USC has played so far. Point spread's 34.5. At least it was when I saw it earlier in the week. Maybe it's changed. It's massive, but the defense, I think, is better than a lot of the teams they've seen so far.
Yeah, we've been quick to kind of dog a little bit on Arizona State this week, and it's mostly because of the injuries they've suffered. When you're having a third or fourth string quarterback potentially being in the game and you've lost so many offensive linemen, it's hard to be super high on a team. But Marshawn Lloyd mentioned the motor of the defense is great. You mentioned the offense had 8 turnovers. The defense only allowed 15 points on those 8 turnovers. If USC did something like that, we would be praising the heck out of them for a defense to be able to withstand their offense having such a terrible game. So that's something you have to give Arizona State credit for. But that being said, it is a Lincoln Riley offense they're going up against this week instead of Fresno State. So we'll see. I think you look at teams that are built to beat USC, and they're built with good offenses and defenses that can get a stop or two. And I'm not sure that, having a great defense and a poor offense is a good way to go up against USC, but we'll see how that goes on the field. We mentioned Dennis Simmons, one of the coaches we got to talk to. Yesterday we get Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch, and normally we get Dennis Simmons or Josh Henson as well as quarterback Caleb Williams, and we were told we were going to get Caleb Williams today. He did not end up coming out for an interview, so didn't get to talk with Caleb ahead of the Arizona State game, so we'll have to wait and see if we can hopefully talk to him after the game. But are there any other kind of little things that were talked about throughout the day, whether it was stuff at practice or your interviews with players, that you want to mention?
Just always disappointing not to get Caleb, and I know things come up and you got to be flexible, but he's the reigning Heisman winner. Everything he says is newsworthy for the most part, and he certainly makes our job easier doing instant analysis. So when we found out he wasn't going to talk, it is what it is, but unfortunate. I was looking forward to catching up with Caleb today. On Caleb, Brendan Rice was asked, have you seen anything different about Caleb freelancing this year? Those plays when they break down, running out of the pocket, and his magic compared to last year. And he said, Caleb's just a magician, man. That's all there is to it. So I think a lot of times Caleb, he just lets his play do the talking. And today we can't watch too much of practice. And when we can watch, the offense is way on the other side. So I didn't get to see him practice too much. But it is fun watching this guy play, and I think years removed from now, and fans know this, when we sit back and we say, who's the greatest player you've ever seen, he'll certainly be on the list. And what a performer he is. Magician, I think, is the perfect word.
I didn't get any of the Brendan Rice interview. Did anyone ask him about what Damani said on the podcast with you guys? That Damani refuting that Brendan's the fastest player?
I didn't even think about that, Jack. I wish we had talked earlier. No, catching up people. Brendan Rice has said that he's the fastest player on the team repeatedly. We asked Damani Jackson on Tunnel Vision last week who the fastest player is, and he not only refuted it, he said, Brendan doesn't even say that around me because he knows the truth. So Damani was pretty adamant that he was the fastest. That would have been a great question today, and I did not ask it, so we'll chalk that up to asking it next week. We'll get back on that. The beauty of the season rolling on, we'll talk to Rice more and more, so I'll definitely ask him that in the future.
Yeah, the media's got to keep that feud going. It's entertainment. You got to figure out who actually is the fastest player on the team, though I don't really think they're going to come to any kind of an agreement. But that's all we've got for you guys on Instant Analysis today. A smaller day for news, but hopefully we can have more from Lincoln Riley and his Zoom meeting tomorrow, and we'll come to you guys with Tunnel Vision tomorrow night live on Inside Troy here on YouTube. But anyways, check out everything that we've got, the interviews that are going up on YouTube, everything on the message boards, going up on the website today. For Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Check out USCfootball.com for more.